the chat, and as I say, ask any questions that you've got, and hopefully you will find this of interest. So my name is Hannah Gray, for those of you who don't know me. I have been in the admin profession in PA, EA and office management roles for over 15 years. It's actually coming up for 20 years soon. And companies include ING, JPM, RBS, City Index and Berenberg, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those in this session. Mostly from financial and retail backgrounds, real estate backgrounds, sorry. And I founded Black and White in 2016, covering various sectors, including charity, education, insurance, fintech and retail. And I founded the office management group and the portal from 2017. And that's how most of you, I think, know about us. So why am I here? Why are you here today? Hopefully you're here because you want to be. A number of our members within the office management portal had asked for the background about me and the person behind the brand in a recent survey we did. And a couple of them said that they wanted a webinar which told them a little bit more about me and how I came up with the business and some of my background. So of course, what our members want, they pretty much get. So that's why we're here today doing this. So what's the story with me? So I grew up and I still live in the area in Southend in Essex. I've just moved around the county a little bit. I'm the middle child. It might not surprise some of you to know that if you know anything about middle child syndrome, with an older sister and a younger brother. And that is me on the left on the telephone there, and my sister, probably me starting my admin career much earlier than I've estimated. I had a fairly successful dad, and I have a really ambitious mum who was in the RAF. She wanted to be a pilot, but as she puts it, she wasn't clever enough to do it. So she worked in the RAF in control rooms, doing all the plugging in and out of telephone calls on the switchboard and things, as they used to do back then. Monopoly was and still is my favorite game. I'm in love with money, and yeah, it was just my favorite game to play. I loved the real estate side of it with the houses, and I could probably still reel off the English version of all the properties around the board as they go from Old Kent Road to Mayfair. That is a fun fact, or maybe not about me. And looking back, when I think about it and doing these slides to just give you something on the screen rather than me just kind of blabbering on about stuff, actually it really made me think, and I think I've probably always had that entrepreneurial spirit within me. So early on, that's me with I don't really know what kind of cut that is. Is that like a mullet? I guess so. And my mum there in the background with our Wendy house. I used to sell anything and everything to my neighbours. A lot of them aren't around anymore, sadly, but we used to live in a cul-de-sac growing up, and I lived there pretty much till I was 24, 25 when I moved out. And I literally used to sell, you know, the usual things like ice creams that you'd make, or ice lollies, lemonade, that kind of stuff. But I would also crush flowers from my mum's garden. She was a keen gardener, and mix it with water and God knows what else, and I would sell it, and they would pay to my neighbours as perfume. And so I was always trying to do things to make business, make money, you know, buy the penny sweets at the shop, because they did used to be penny sweets back then. And yeah, it was definitely in me, I think, from a young age. I don't think my mum and dad would be surprised or were surprised to see that I set up on my own some years ago. Unfortunately, I was really badly bullied from the age of about 13 to 14 years old. It was at the same time that my dad was really quite unwell with a tumour as well. So it was all quite a tragic time for me in my life. And it was really tough. So anyone that's been bullied will know, and there's different severities of it. Mine wasn't too bad, fortunately, but it was physical at times. And there was a point when I considered taking my own life. And I didn't think I'd get emotional about it, but my brother came home and saw me and stopped me. So yeah, gosh, I didn't expect it to get like that. Right, so I think the reason I put it in here is because I think some of what that taught me, or what happened then, everything makes you who you are today. And I think a lot of what I do and a lot of what's in me is part of me proving to these people that knocked me down and that kicked me physically and mentally, a way of saying I'm more than you thought I was, and I am worthy, and I deserve, to live the life I want to live. All were pretty useless. We did report it to them, but they were quite useless at the time. And once, if you're like me and you're a bit of a stationery geek, I always loved my pencil cases and pens and pencils and things. And they threw my favourite pencil case, the bastards, out of the window onto the school roof. And that's one of my saddest memories, more than the physical stuff that they occasionally did, was when they threw that pencil case out the window. So whenever I can buy new pens and stationery, I do, and I make the most of it now. I did babysitting. I worked hard from a young age to earn money and to just get life experience. I always wanted to learn, and I wanted to. I was someone who came home from school with my schoolwork and would say to my mum and dad, like, look, I got an A+ in this. I loved history, I loved science, and I loved graphics, or graphic design as it's called at the time. And yeah, I got out early. I did babysitting for whoever I could. I was a dishwasher upper at a really stinky pub down the road to where we lived. I waitressed there in the end when I was old enough to, and I worked at Waitrose when the first one came to Southend for over 3 years, in fact, in various areas, from the delicatessen. So I, cut up meat and cheese and all sorts of things like that. I became a cheese expert. And actually, Waitrose still to this day is one of my favourite jobs, because I met so many people there. It's where I really learned who I was. I made friendships that I still have now. I met one of my very first boyfriends, and yeah, I just loved pleasing the customers and connecting with different people and seeing our regulars in there as well. And I even did some hair modelling. So I'm going to show you me as a hair model. Hopefully you can see the blue. That's me doing some hair modelling back in the day as well. So I tried a few different things before I got into this. So yeah, I definitely had a few different things. And I decided that uni wasn't for me. I wanted to get into the real world and didn't want to be educated anymore. I didn't like being taught when I was sort of late teens. I'd had quite enough of being taught and told what to do by people, other than when I was working for them. So I flunked my A-levels and AS levels a little bit. I did really well at GCSEs with lots of A's and B's and some C's coming out of it. But yeah, uni wasn't for me. I wanted to get into the real world. I wanted to learn and be hands-on, and I wanted to earn some money. I saw uni for me as a waste of money and a waste of time. The crazy thing is with these bullies is that I was still friends with some of them up until in my early 20s, at which point I realized that I didn't need these toxic people in my life anymore, and they actually haunted me still in my dreams and things. And at that point, I decided to surround myself with people who made me feel good, who inspired me, who lifted me, and didn't make me feel bad about myself. So it took me till then, but yeah, in my early 20s, I wasn't friends with them anymore. A family trip to London at a young age I saw a woman in a rain mac wearing high black heels with a gorgeous designer bag, and I remember thinking, I want to be her. And I think I actually said it to my mum, I want to be her. And I saw her as this sort of picture of success, and now, of course, to me, success isn't measured by how you look or how you dress, your status or your salary. It's measured in how much time I have for myself, how much time I have to spend with my family, the inspiration that I seem to provide for people in our profession as well. That's success to me, not that woman in that rain mac in heels, although I still do admire that, and I still aim to dress like that at times when we're back in London. So yeah, when I finished high school and sixth form, I hit a crossroad, and I wasn't going to go to uni. I was either going to go to college and do an ILEX legal secretarial degree, which is what I ended up doing, or diploma it was called at the time, or go traveling for a year. And they were the options at that time. I think I was 19, 18, 19, and I took the legal secretarial route, and I'm really glad I did. I got my first taste of London life, worked at Freshfields, Brockes and Derringer on work experience, and they offered me a role which I actually turned down at the time because I didn't feel like I was ready for London. And that was yeah, my first taste of the London working life. So getting into work, that's me with my first permanent full-time job friends on a night out. I think it was like a Christmas do or something. I'm just here. And yeah, I was a branch secretary for an estate agent. That was my very first job. And appallingly, I remember why I got the job. And this just showed you, and we're going back almost 20 years, as I say, it showed you how appalling, and at the time I didn't really appreciate it, the world can be at times. I was hired, I'd like to think, and I still think, because I had, the qualification of the secretarial diploma, and I could demonstrate that I was organised. Waitrose had actually tried to keep me and offered me a permanent role to be tracked for branch manager. They brought their head of HR down to talk to me, and I turned it down in the end, but gave it some consideration. And yeah, I think there was obviously something the guy saw in me, but actually some months after he hired me, he said to me that he'd hired me because he liked my legs. Isn't that awful? And I still like the guy. We're still friends on Facebook, but yeah, he's obviously got that old hat mentality in him where he thinks, or did at the time think, that was acceptable. I'm sure he doesn't behave like that now. But yeah, that didn't resonate with me at the time as being very negative and slightly sexist, or somewhat very sexist. But that was the time, and that's apparently why I got the job. Much as that might be, I did really well in that company. I sorted lots of things out for our small office of about 12 people, and I left that job about 6 or 7 months in or so, because I was offered another job where I earned £500 a year more. So that shows you the salaries for me back then. And I stayed in touch with the estate agents, and they asked me, because I tested this new IT system where we were moving into Windows from MS-DOS, which, if anyone knows, was like the black and white screens where you just use the keyboard. There was no mouse in there. So we were moving over from that, and I tested the system for them, and I wrote a sort of user guide, and I did a debug test script for them to give back to the developers. And they asked me to stay in touch so that they could help, I could help them continue to test it. So I did. I worked weekends whilst I had my new job, handing over and training the new branch secretary, who's actually the lady on the right in the picture. And yeah, we just stayed in touch. And 6 months later, they called me and said, will you come back? They offered me a £5,000 a year pay rise and a company car. And they asked me to manage all of the branch secretaries for this estate agents, they're part of the Countrywide Property Group, for anyone that's heard of them. And yeah, they asked me to manage their IT and their marketing and be the PA to the 3 regional directors. So of course I jumped at the chance and was really proud that they had seen something in me and gave me that opportunity. And the company that I was at, which was called Easy Loans, actually asked me to stay. They fought for me to stay and offered me a promotion as well, but I turned that down, thank goodness, because they sunk a few years later. And it always kind of continued like that. I was always encouraged and supported by the leaders and the managers within the businesses that I worked for, and it came with its challenges. I had 19 women that I was managing at the age of 20 years old. I was younger than pretty much all of them, and I was hiring people, And I had to learn fast how to be a good people person, be a good leader, be a good manager, how to train and recruit people. But one of the girls actually in this image here on the left side, she and I have been friends for a long time, and she's moved away now, so we haven't seen each other for a while, but we still message occasionally. And she's messaged me recently to say, I think it was when I was nominated for Businesswoman of the Year, and she messaged me and said, I'm so proud of you, and I'll never forget what you did for me, because I hired her into one of our branches near where I live. And she was really struggling at the time, and her boss was a bit of a bully. His name was Alex. And I went in there one day and we just spent time, we just locked ourselves away and we went through the processes, and I reorganized her desk a bit, and we went through some of the kind of pitfalls and the ways that she could turn it around. And she was in the sort of beautician trade before she moved into this secretarial role. And it was things like that that inspired me and continued to push me and show that I could keep doing more, and I could keep supporting people and getting them to see their potential, because I'd had so many people helping me to see mine. My boss, Jason, who was one of my favorite bosses, and again, he will sometimes pop up on my LinkedIn posts. You might see him saying things like, I always knew you'd do this, Hannah, and that kind of thing. But he would push me to explore new things. And I remember some were really good and some were really bad and scary when I first had to fire someone. So I was at this estate agency in the end for another 3 years. And I had my own PA at the time, and she was pretty awful, coming in very late, leaving early, taking lots of personal calls in the day. And he said to me, right, we've got to fire her. And it was the most horrific experience I've ever been through. She cried an awful lot. And, you know, again, we're talking almost 20 years ago, so it was a slightly different process then. But it taught me a lot about that particular process and other processes, setting expectations on your staff from the off and not letting emotions get in the way of business. It was a really tough thing to go through, but yeah, it was about business. We weren't getting what we were paying her to do. He also told me to always have a portfolio of your work for interviews. So I still do this to the day. So he was at the time, not too long before I left, he was leaving, and he asked me to help him with his interview sort of prep. And so I literally have, I mean, it's a bit more company-esque now, but a portfolio of all the different things I've done for clients and for businesses over the years. This is from when I was at RBS and so on and so forth, JP Morgan. And I keep it with me to take to interviews or to show to clients these days. So that was a really good tip that I learned from him, because when you're in an interview, if you get a little bit flustered, it's a really nice thing to have in front of you. It's also kind of like that smile file. And at the back of it actually is a letter from him when he left the company, just saying, you know, over the past few years, you've demonstrated a real hunger to improve, and that is something which you have my utmost respect for. And I think he's nailed it. I've always been someone who's really ambitious and always wants to improve in myself and also in who I work for, in the business, in the client, or whatever it might be. And there's another letter here from one of the other directors of the company, just saying, you know, again, that they want to thank me personally for never letting them down, and the willingness to always work beyond expectations. So I've kept things like that, and you know, that one's 2005 and the other one is 2006. So they're quite old now, but I'll probably always keep them, because they mean so much more than the salaries and then you know, the other things that you can get from work, the company car and this kind of thing, and the benefits. It's those things that I do it for, because that's what makes me proud, and they're my motivators. Yeah, so I'm just reading my notes here, and one thing actually that I still look back on and find quite funny is when I decided it was time to go to London. I had an interview near Liverpool Street, and I went and I was really nervous, but also really quite confident that I could do this job, that it was for me. It was kind of a sidestep / a step back, because I was managing a lot of people locally, and this was a PA role and not so much the managing of people role. And they asked me, what would your boss say about you? My mind sometimes goes to silly places when I'm put on the spot like that. And I said, he would say I have nice legs. because that's the first thing that came to my head, because that's what the guy told me is why he hired me. So I didn't get that job, needless to say. And so a note to all is that we all screw up from time to time and say stupid things that we can't take back, but we live and learn, hey. Yeah, I kept trying anyway, and I eventually left the estate agents and started at a company called ING Real Estate at the age of 24. And I think in all of these jobs, in all of these roles, I always found a way to create opportunities and projects and improvements. So I first noticed the office management role at ING. There was an office manager there, and her name was Jackie, and I was thought, oh my God, her job looks so glam. And looking back, actually, she was quite a lazy office manager, to be honest. She took very long lunches and sat at her desk most of the day. She didn't really move around the office much, but I still really liked the look of her job. So when they asked if anyone wanted to get involved in the office move, I put my hand up. In fact, I think I threw my whole body in. And got involved in lots of events on the event committee and processes and procedures to improve the back operations of the business. And when I decided it was time to move on, I always tended to keep my eye on the job market. I was keen to make sure that I continually progressed in my role. Having had at a young age the management role and the training and the recruitment, as well as the PA stuff, I wanted to make sure that I progressed quickly back that kind of level of responsibility when I went into London. And so I got a job at JP Morgan. And I was warned by people at ING at the time that they're an American company and they will work you to the bone. And never was a truer word spoken, because my hours on average were 9:30 or 9 a.m. till 11 p.m. at night in the office. Sometimes I'd finish at 1, 2 a.m. and be back in for 9 the next day. And it did break me. I actually had a period where I was suffering from stress, and I got a little bit ill as a result and was given some time out to recover and repair. And I became a bit resentful of it, of the company, because they hadn't done anything about it sooner. So I am very much now aware of when my stresses trigger and what impact that starts to have on my health, more than my mental health, to be honest. So within 3 months at JP Morgan, I was given the opportunity to work on a 170k fit out. So I was the PA to the office management team and sort of backup PA to the CEO and COO of their European function, of their European division. And yeah, they walked me around. I remember my boss, Dan, walking me around with Sally. And I had a pen and paper, pad and paper, and I was walked around in about 40 minutes to hand over to do my first ever 170k fit out with a 3-phase move. And Sally was going to help me, but she worked in another division as the office manager. And I did it, it was successful, and they offered me my first office management role. And I fell in love with it. And I remember Dan saying to me, you have to leave your PA world behind. You have to leave that role behind. Are you sure you want to do this? To learn, I was like, yeah. Like, I always thought I wanted to be a PA for someone like Victoria Beckham, a celeb PA, flying around the world with them. And actually, when I found office management, it spoke to all of my skills and all of the things I love doing, like the selling flowered perfume to my neighbours and organising that, and the whole piece that goes with it, so much more than being a PA did. So at that point, I thought I had said goodbye to my PA career. And then about 3.5 years after this, I left for RBS and went into an EA and office management combined role, hybrid role. And it's probably my sort of biggest only career regret, was moving to RBS. The only thing I don't regret about it really is some more experience I learned from there, but also the friends I gained who are still friends now. But it was a sidestep, or more like a step back, because I'd gone back into this EA world, and I very, very quickly learned that I didn't want to be doing that. And it was really quiet there. There wasn't a lot of work to do. So I, again, just put things into action, got processes set up, started training the other office managers and EAs on different ways that we could do things. And yeah, after some time, they created me. I remember my boss Zoe said to me, right, we're creating your own role, and it's going to look like this. You're going to be called the office manager. You're kind of cover office management for all the departments in this area. And I'd already been offered, or soon after, I was offered another role at City Index. And just before I left was when I had that first seed about creating a business, because JPM versus RBS, the processes, I mean, this was at the time of, around the collapse and the government funding and everything. And you can imagine the differences between the two companies who were investment banks. They were both the investment bank divisions, in their processes, in their procedures, in their hiring, in their onboarding processes, in how they dealt with health and safety and maintenance and all these other things that we deal with. They were worlds apart. So I really started to try and influence RBS to have that impact. But obviously it's a huge company and I was limited in what I could do. So that's where the first seed was sown, where I thought there's something here. And I moved to City Index and I had a global role. I absolutely loved it there. It was a really sociable company, and I saw lots of opportunities. I saved them over £650,000 a year on their bottom line spending, through changing contracts and service providers where there were some really bad contracts signed. I'm very confident that my predecessor was in bed with a number of our contractors. She went on holidays with them. The cleaning company, she actually moved to them after she left that company. And yeah, they were charging us 3 times. They were charging us over £300,000 a year for cleaning a 35,000 square foot office. Like crazy figures, and it should have been about 125k a year. So there was all sorts going on. So some easy saving opportunities, as well as some that I had to work a bit harder for. And I just started to see, my team weren't really sure of why we did DSE assessments or how to do some of the office moves we were doing and the churn. And we always had last minute joiners, and HR weren't always communicating with us. And the seeds grew here. So I started to talk to people about my idea about creating a business, a consultancy, to help offices and office managers run their business more effectively and not sign these awful contracts, or make sure that they can get out of them if they do sign them, and these kind of things, as well as teach my team and empower them and upskill them so that they could be more supportive for the business. So the receptionists who were pretty much doing the typical receptionist jobs actually started tendering stationery and reading contracts and getting involved in moves and fit outs with me. And the receptionist now is still there, and she is now an office manager, and she's just completed a huge fit out for them, and a big office move. A merger happened at City Index, and I was actually headhunted at the time. So the opportunity came for me to move to Berenberg, and I saw the same sort of thing happening there, where there was an awful, almost £2 million fit out that was done by the predecessor, and it wasn't her fault. I honestly don't think it was. I think it's just where she was under so much pressure, she had so much responsibility, and nobody really knows what they're doing when you're thrown these things, and when you don't have that internal support, when there's nowhere to go externally for training. So again, those seeds just kept growing and growing and growing. And actually, before I left City Index, the lawyer there, the contracts lawyer who was internal, said to me, we were at a leaving lunch, her name was Claire, and she said to me, when you set this business up, Hannah, give me a call and I'll do your contracts for you. And she did. She did my contracts when I set the company up. Yeah, so the merger happened, I left, joined Berenberg, and yeah, I just saw the same thing: the lack of support for office managers, the lack of training, the lack of resources, the lack of opportunity, but yet at the same time this vast, huge list of responsibilities for Berenberg in particular, a fast growing, high pressured company. And I still kept all these cards, and I've got them here just to show you, all these leaving cards from all my different roles with comments in them of people saying, thank you so much for all your help. I mean, it's the main kind of message that's in here. Someone said, can I have your phone number, because I don't trust anybody else to look after our office like you do. I need to call you in emergencies, you know, and I've kept them all because, again, these are the kind of things that keep me motivated, and they're in a kind of keep safe box for me. But those sorts of things are things that I treasure. And when I used to read those after I'd left each of these companies, again, they kind of embedded that thought for me that this is what I should be doing. And this is what I'm meant to do, is spread this support, spread this knowledge that I have and that I can share with other people to try and help them in their roles. So yeah, I thought there's loads of consultants for HR, for IT, for legal, for data, for compliance, but nothing for office managers. So Black and White was born. And I literally quit Berenberg one day. I didn't plan it. I went in, and truth be told, I was pretty pissed off about some things that had happened in the company. When they headhunted me, they'd promised me a global role and it wasn't really forthcoming. I'd saved them £500,000 a year, and there were just sorts of red tape that they told me didn't exist when they hired me in the company. And a lot of things were happening between Germany, which was the head office, in London, and I was being pulled and pushed into different directions which just weren't really suiting me. So I walked in one day, three things happened. I can only remember two of them. One was something to do with the HR lady who had renamed a policy I'd written, something stupid, you know, so very stupid things that actually mattered to you at the time. And I wrote an email to my boss, and he was in New York at the time. He was the managing director, and I quit. And I never, ever, ever would have thought that I would be the sort of person to do that. I was always very planned and tactical. I always made sure I had security around my jobs, researched it, signed contracts before I, you know, handed my notice in from one to the other. But something was in me that day. And, you know, there were moments, and there still probably will be in the future, when I think I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have done it. But I'm really glad I did. And I just wish I hadn't perhaps done it in the fashion that I did. And I've spoken to my old boss since, and we're on good terms still, and we're still in touch. So that's all good. So they gave me 3 months garden leave because I was very senior there, and I had access to all sorts of budgets and expenditures. So that was their process. So I worked a couple of weeks of my notice, and then I was off. And they knew I wanted to set up this business, so they gave me the garden leave to do that as well. And I went on holiday with my sister. And we were thinking, I read this book, which is My Personal Branding for Brits by Jennifer, I can't think of her surname now, I'll grab the book in a second if anyone wants to know the name. And I made lots of notes on building my personal brand and building the company and what the business would do and what we would offer. And I needed to come up with a name. And Black and White was normally my choice of dress and color code. If you ever see my wardrobe, it's mostly black and white and mint and coral. So for anyone that knows the Portal branding well, you'll see where that's come from. And I was in a black and white bikini. And I said to my sister, black and white, what about black and white office consultancy? And she was like, oh my God, yes, it's great, because you're Hannah Gray. Black and white mixed together equals grey. You are a bit of a black and white person, but you can then see the grey areas and things. So, you know, it came from there. And that was it. July 2016, it was formed. I had about 3 months of money saved for bills beyond the garden leave. So I had about 6 months to make it work. And I'm glad I didn't have much more than that, and that the pressure mounted as time went on, because I think if I had I wouldn't have pushed as hard as I did in those first 6 months to get business, because I would have probably relaxed a bit more on the fact that, oh, it's fine, I've got money for a year or whatever it might be. So I'm really glad that I'd set it up in that way. The mission has always been to upskill, empower and connect with the office management community, and that's evolved over the years and expanded since the launch of the portal and our latest initiatives like the awards and the course. But ultimately, it was always to give office managers a platform to learn that didn't exist before. The opportunity for businesses as well to have the best and most efficient office and operational running that they could. And the group grew when I had my son. My mind doesn't ever rest much, even at 2 a.m. when I'm feeding him. And I had to do more for the community. I had to do more for the profession. So much like a woman on a mission as I ever am, I kept exploring opportunities to connect office managers together and provide opportunities like every other profession seems to have. And my longest time in any job is this one. The company is almost 5 years old, and the longest I'd ever been in a company before then was at JP Morgan and Waitrose, which was 3.5 years. So it just shows me when I look at that I truly think this is what I was supposed to be doing. So what have I learned? Well, one thing is, don't take shit from your clients. I had a client, and they were a really good client, and I could have made hundreds of thousands from them. And I'd done a few bits and pieces of work for them, some health and safety stuff and desk assessments. And I then did an office move for them out in Munich. So I traveled to Germany back and forth to do this move. And when I came back, I remember I was with another client and I had a phone call from my contact there. And he said to me, oh, I'm going to chat to you about this. They had a big London office move to do. And, you know, this was worth sort of 20, 40,000 pounds of fees to me. And he said, you know, I'm going to put you forward. We're really impressed with what you've done in Munich. The guys are really happy. So we want you to do this. And we've got some other work. In the meantime, we're going to make your preferred supplier for all health and safety stuff and desk assessments. I'll send you an email in a sec with what I want as well. And I was a bit confused by that because I was like, what you want? And I hadn't invoiced them yet for the Munich move. It was literally like a few days after I got back from finishing it. And I had an email from him, and I remember the shock I felt. So this was probably in my second year of business. And he had basically asked me to buy him personally tickets to Manchester United's game, box seat tickets. They were about £350 each for him and 10 of them in total. And yeah. Now, me being naive at times, I read it and I thought, oh, he knows I've got loads of contacts. He's asking me to try and find someone to get these tickets for him. Obviously, they're hard to get hold of. So I reached out to all my event contacts and I emailed back and said, I can't get hold of any. They're sold out. And he said, essentially, the reply back made it a lot clearer to me that he was asking me to personally buy those tickets. So I sat on it for a few hours and I spoke to, they're still a client of mine now, I spoke to the partner of this company. I said, look, can I have a word? And I said, I really don't know what to do. Like, morally, I'm not going to do this, right? But it's how I go back with it. And what do I do? Do I talk to my lawyer? Do I report him to his company? You know, all sorts of things through my head. And in the end, I just replied. I didn't report him. I did speak to my lawyer. And I essentially said, no, that's not how I conduct business. And the cheek of it was I hadn't invoiced them for this Munich move yet. So me funding this as a one-woman business was just crazy. For him to ask me to spend essentially £3,500 when, yeah, I hadn't invoiced them for Munich move. And it was barely just over that as well, the value of that. So don't take shit from your clients is definitely one of the things I've learned, and go with your gut. When you know something doesn't feel right, and you know the bribe is a big thing, right? And morally, you know that's not the right thing to do, and shouldn't be done. But in other things that you're doing, go with your gut. You are wholly accountable, but that doesn't mean that you can't get support and advice at any time. And the luxury is that where you can take that time out, sleep on it, and come up with the solution overnight. I rely on my sleep conscience, as I call it, an awful lot to give me that kind of gut feeling and what's resonating with me is the right decision to go for. There's an awful lot of noise when you start out in business. Networking is really, really key. And it's a way that I've managed to meet so many of you, so many of my clients. But you'll get a lot of noise from people who give you advice, whether you've asked for it or not. And some of it is really helpful, and some of it is really unhelpful. And so it's a case of making sure fairly early on that you can tune in and tune out what you do and don't want to hear. And again, going with that gut and what feels right for you. And saying to some people, and I've said it to a couple of people in my time, particularly men who are much older than me, who are telling me how to run my business. And I've quite literally said to them, you know, I didn't call for advice on this, actually, you know, I was calling about this. Because I see a lot of times they see me, I'm not particularly blonde at the moment, but I will be after the weekend, them seeing me as a young female from Essex who's blonde, stereotyping me. She doesn't know what she's doing. And actually I do most of the time. So yeah, tuning in, tuning out, and standing your ground. When you know something's right for you and for your business, stick to it and go with it. And if you make mistakes, learn from it, because you will. I've made loads of mistakes, and some things I really regret, but I've tried where I can each time to learn 2 or 3 things from each of them and see the opportunities as I've grown. When it gets tough, consider the benefits. And you know, I've had a really tough week, truth be told. We've been unwell. My son has been in my bed most nights, so I haven't had a decent night's sleep for 2 weeks. And yeah, it's just, you know, the weather's turned a bit, and it's just felt like a bit of a hard week. And I always tune in and remember something that another lawyer from Berenberg, her name was Alex, said to me when I told her that I was going to do this business and I'd finally resigned. Do not give up. Your first few years will be tough. She said they'll be effing tough, actually. She was a bit of a swearer. But I don't want to see your name pop up on my LinkedIn saying you're an office manager for another company again. I want it to say Hana Gray, CEO of this awesome company. And I never forget that. And that's word for word what she said. And we stayed in touch as well. And whenever I have a hard day, I think of her and I think of that. And I think of the faith that she and all these other people throughout my career have had in me, and making sure that I live up to that, and that I prove them right. And that I also prove those bullies wrong. I basically say up yours to the naysayers and the bullies. Resilience and thick skin, I think it takes that to be a good office manager anyway, and to, you know, carry the weight of responsibilities, but also the negative things about the toilets and the dishwasher and the cleanliness and COVID and everything else that gets thrown at us and that will come your way. But trusting yourself is key. It's really key. And sometimes it does disappear and you have to work hard to get it back, and making notes and looking back at smile files and things like this, and how you've come as far as you have and where you want to go, are really good ways of staying on track. Making the most of the opportunities that I've had, even when I have made a bad choice career-wise. RBS is the best example of that. I've gained something from it, and mostly friends along the way. And everything happens for a reason. I truly believe that. I think all the people I've met in my life, all the jobs I've had, all the opportunities I've been given, but also the bullies that I faced in my life, and the difficult things that have gone on through my life, you know, the men that have tried to criticize me or tell me what to do, versus, you know, the men that have inspired me and empowered me. I've seen the difference in those, and I've listened to the ones that have empowered me and not the ones that have tried to put me down. So take it all in and feel proud. And that is my business journey. Well, rather an emotional one, but hopefully that has been interesting for you, and hasn't reduced you to tears like me out of boredom or anything else. Has anyone got any questions at all? Yeah, someone said bullies are horrible. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they really are. Okay, that's all right, everybody. You're welcome. That's my journey. So I was like I said, I was really nervous about doing it. I think more nervous, if I skip back to this slide here, This is a very prominent picture for me, and Adrian, you'll probably remember this night from when we launched the portal, and I was so nervous. You can see me doing breathing exercises there. Walking in the corridor for a few minutes before I went on stage to launch the office management portal and tell everybody about it. And it's the most nervous I have been since that day, doing this today for some reason. So yeah, there we go. Interesting for me as well to go through. Pleasure. All right, everybody. Well, oh, Adrian said it didn't show. Well, I had a cold that day as well, so it must be something to do with having colds and doing these things. But yeah, I think I was on stage for like all of 3 minutes from what was meant to be a 10-minute presentation because I was so nervous. But there we go. It's all gone up to plan and it's worked, so it's fine. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I hope you've been able to take some takeaways with that from that as well. And I will see you all very soon. Have a good day. Pleasure. I'll see you soon.